Do you remember where you were when you first heard the news?
Yeah, just literally a few feet from where I'm sitting right now at the other end of was a different table, but the other end of my kitchen table. And came out of the shower. I'd done an afternoon workout and I showered. And while I was in the shower, the news had come out. And so I pick up my phone afterward. It was sitting here on the table and I just see all these texts. And at first it was just people in disbelief. Is it true? The TMZ report was out that he had died in a helicopter crash, and I just remember kind of being this jumble of like, as I flashed through all these texts, is it true? Kobe helicopter really? And it took me a moment to piece it all together. Kobe was killed in a helicopter crash. What? And so I went online and I saw the confirmations and I saw all the just started making calls, started texting people, trying to see if I could get some more confirmation. One of my first thoughts when I heard that there were several other people aboard, I was concerned that his security people who I'd gotten to know, who were frequently with him and had been on those helicopters many a time, I was afraid one of them might have perished in the crash too. And I heard back from him. Took a while later, but I heard back from him. That was one relief and one piece of good news on that day. I remember being asked to call in and do a Sports Center hit. I was still somewhat in a daze as I did that, and it still doesn't seem like he's gone just because he's present. Hardly a day goes by where you don't see his image or see a video of him, right? And I had gone from spending as much time with him as literally anyone in my life during his time with the Lakers. I'd see him so many days of the year, but once he'd retired, I'd only seen him once, maybe twice. Pretty sure the last time I saw him was at the Shaquille O'Neal statue unveiling, and so he wasn't in my life physically anymore. So I've been experiencing just through video or seeing him in the media, and so that's continued. So in that ways, it felt the same, and it still doesn't feel like he's gone. But it's just weird and sad to think that I'll never speak to him again. There's questions I would have for him, and he got so good at providing perspective because you look around the latter stage of his career. Well, he was the only guy who had actually played against Michael Jordan that was still in the league and could discuss what it was like and competing against him and what he learned from him, and to talk about the new guys coming up and what he expected from them. Just so much wisdom that he had. I love how he became an advocate for women's sports and the WNBA in his latter years as well. And you saw that come to the forefront in the service for him, where you had so many prominent members of the women's basketball community speaking. And I valued that version of Kobe. I enjoyed that version of Kobe in the later years of his career. Uh, Even though I enjoyed watching him, the number 8 version earlier in his career was more fun to watch, but the number 24 late career Kobe was more fun to talk to.
Now, Jay, for Laker fans and basketball fans around the world, Kobe was so much more than just a great basketball player. Can you put in perspective, for our listeners and viewers, why his death hit people, most of whom never met him, why it hit him so hard?
He really came to embrace and adapt to and represent LA. And, even if it cost him some in his hometown, getting booed at the All-Star game in Philly, for example, but he was all in on LA and going to the games, even the Dodger games, even when they were playing against his hometown Phillies, and holding up the LA signs with his fingers and representing the Dodgers. He kind of lucked out in a way that the Rams and the Raiders moved out of town right before he got to LA in the mid 90s. So he could maintain his Eagles fandom. So he never was in conflict with the local teams there because of the Eagles, was something that he wasn't willing to give up, and they didn't have to play against any LA teams. But he just really embraced LA and came to love the city and everything that it represented. And the fact that he won an Oscar and was celebrated in the Hollywood community like that. Marrying a Latina woman obviously endeared him to the huge Latino population in LA, and so he was LA in so many ways. Tragic connection to the fires. His first house that he had in LA was in the Pacific Palisades. So I was wondering that it might not even be around anymore, but he really understood the city and the different neighborhoods and had done some things that didn't get a lot of credit for, refurbishing basketball courts, for example, and just some kind of connections that he had to local boys and girls clubs or other gymnasiums that mattered to him. So he was an LA guy through and through. It did matter that was the only team he played for in his entire 2-decade career. He was beloved like very few athletes in that city ever have. Fernando Mania was big. Obviously, Magic Johnson was huge, but the love they had for Kobe Bryant in some ways was unmatched. I would say it was the strongest bond, even to the point of denialism. Was he the most popular? I think that depends on the age you are and the era in which you came up. But there was no stronger bond because he got there as a teenager, and LA fans got to see him grow up in front of their eyes and grow and have the ups and downs right along with him.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned your fellow Hall of Famer, Mark Spears. Mark told me one time that when Kobe was about to meet someone for the first time, he would actually do research and find out about them in advance so that he could greet them by name and ask them a question about themselves, which would kind of put them at ease. Did you ever witness anything like that? And if you did, how did the person react to Kobe actually knowing about them and wanting to know more about them?
I didn't see that because I think that was probably in case if he was going to do a sit-down interview with somebody or probably something more extensive. So most of the time I saw him dealing with new people, it would be in a group setting. So you didn't get to see the fruits of his research, for example. I do remember sometimes somebody coming that kind of caught him out of the blue and was asking some kind of sketchy questions. I remember Kobe after looking kind of like, who's that person? Who's that guy? But one thing he did do, you knew full well that he was reading your stuff, especially at the LA Times. And he was the last or among the last of a generation that really understood the value of, having allies in the local media. So he always made sure he was on good terms with at least one of the columnists at the LA Times, whether it was myself or Bill Plaschke or TJ Simers. He would kind of rotate among the three. So if one of us had a rift between us and Kobe, then somebody else would step in. But he fully understood that at the time, the LA Times really mattered in that town and really helped shape opinion in that town. He'd better have somebody. And I just don't think anyone, starting with the LeBron James era, it just didn't matter as much what your relationship was like with the hometown paper. But for Kobe, he came up in a time when that still mattered. So, he really made sure that, he had some type of connection, some type of outlet through the local columnists.
Smart man. Now with Kobe, I think there's no debate that he's probably the closest player we've seen to Michael Jordan when it comes to competitiveness and his burning desire to win every game and even every scrimmage. Do you feel he purposely patterned himself after MJ, or do you think he simply was just cut from the same cloth?
It was both. He talked like him. He had the same cadence in his speech initially. He kind of walked around like him. Doug Collins, who obviously coached Michael Jordan, he was covering the NBA and providing analysis for NBC and TNT when Kobe first came in the league. He would always remark on how much Kobe patterned himself off Michael. But it's one thing to pattern yourself after him, but what you can't do is just try to imitate his drive. And Kobe, one of the few, if not the only players that I saw come up after Michael that had that same drive. And it was most evident the last time they squared off. Michael came to Staples Center in LA one last time in his final year with the Wizards. And remember, Kobe gained like 40 points in the first half. Remember, and it was almost sad to see because Michael was almost helpless and defenseless. At that age, he just couldn't keep up with Kobe. And that look in Kobe's eyes was something I had only seen with Michael before. I got a chance to see it up close with Michael, back when we were sitting on the baseline or real close in those NBA arenas. And Kobe, I watched that game on TV. I forget where I wasn't there. Actually, no, you know what? I was there, I think. But I just that Kobe had that same look. I think what it was in the first half when he was scoring all those points, they were going the other side of Staples Center from where I was sitting. But just looking at the monitor and seeing just the fury that he had and rage, and that was the way that Michael played. And he said something. He came to regret the Michael comparisons because I think he realized that in the eyes of the media and a lot of fans, he would never measure up to Michael. So he tried to distance himself a little bit from the comparisons later on in his career. But the one time he willingly went there was he talked about him and Michael were the only two that did it where they were attacking. They were going to do it from volume shooting, and they were just going to try to outscore you and out attack you and break you down and win through sheer willpower rather than utilize all the facets of the triangle offense. For example, sometimes it was just going to be mano a mano. And he said, he said that and made that comparison. And that was, it just caught my eye because to hear him bridge himself to Michael and to willingly make the comparison to Michael and mention himself right alongside Michael was the one and only time I heard that.
Now, of all the great moments that Kobe has had in his career, there's countless ones. Is there one from his career that always stood out for you?
Several, but the 60-point finale was a wild one. That was the most fun because it had always been this battle of Kobe shooting too much and Kobe's not getting his teammates involved. And this time it was just go for it, Kobe. Have at it. Your last go round. So that was kind of the most fun. I remember the breakout. I was thinking about this, that it was a key moment because it was fun. It was the arrival, the maturation, but it was also like a moment of the teenage innocence still. And I think he was 20 or 21 at the time it happened, but it was right after they'd clinched his first trip to the NBA Finals, and Shaq and Kobe in that era Lakers' first trip to the NBA Finals, and that Game 7 comeback against Portland. And remember, all those playoffs, they would get up early, they'd be on the brink of finishing off the series and clinching the series, and then to let the other team back in. So up 2-0 in the best of 5 against Sacramento. That series went the maximum 5 games. Up 3-0, couldn't finish off the sweep against Phoenix, had to win that in 5. Up 3-1 on Portland, and then they had to come back and finish that in 7. And people were criticizing them for the lack of killer instinct, and that was being questioned, that they couldn't put these teams away. They couldn't finish them off. Did they really have what it took to be a champion if you didn't have that instinct in you? And, I'll never forget, he comes off the podium and he walks by and he kind of has this gleam in his eye and he goes, killer instinct? No? Like, we got it, right? And yeah, I guess it's there. He was like skipping almost. And we talked about that was like his graduation. He was the age of a college senior and he had just kind of graduated. But I'll just never forget that giddiness. And it was that first run. And, afterwards it becomes almost a chore, right? When you're defending the championship rather than trying to attain a championship for the first time. And it was like a gleam in his eyes, this twinkle from his first trip to the finals. And he almost like skipped down the hall. Not quite, but he was in that mood. And so that's something that sticks with me. The private moments, that was just me and him. And there's memories that are all there. That the lob that he threw to Shaq that afternoon is certainly one of the all-time highlights. That's one that Phil Jackson points to, actually, because the presence and the wherewithal of Kobe sharing the ball at that moment rather than taking a shot. So Phil has pointed out that one as one of the key moments in the evolution of Kobe Bryant. But I think of that private moment he had when he just kind of, wanted to tweak people a little bit, but just killer instinct? No.
Jay, my favorite personal story about you and Kobe came during his final season when you were at Staples Center for our Tuesday night NBA Coast to Coast show, which remains my favorite NBA show to produce, largely because of what we were able to do with you being there. But that night, you went above and beyond the call of duty in preparing for a pregame interview you did with Kobe for the show. So could you please share the story of the VHS tape and his reaction?
So it came from as Kobe was moving up the all-time scoring list, and he moved past an Elgin Baylor or an Oscar Robertson. And, we'd ask him what it meant to him to pass these legends of the game on the scoring list. And he would always have some commentary and description about their game. And these were guys who played long before he was even born. And I remember, so I finally asked him, I said, Kobe, how do you know about these guys? You weren't around to see them. How are you describing their games? And he said his grandfather had sent him a videotape called Golden Greats of Basketball when he was in Italy, when his dad was playing over there and he was a kid. And so he would just watch and study them, and he just got to know them. He'd watch that tape over and over again. So I said, let me see if I can find this on eBay. And sure enough, I was able to come across it. And, I watched it before I gave it to him, but I said, okay, I'm going to surprise him and see what he has to say about that. And his face lit up and he couldn't stop smiling and laughing. I've got a couple great screen grabs from that interview. But I've shown that to students. Like, if you can give a little gift, if you can surprise, if you can bring something to the interview and just warm them up, anything nostalgia, anytime you can get them feeling nostalgic or looking back and thinking about good stuff. That reminded him of his grandfather, who at that point in time had passed away. But here he got this little reminder. It wasn't the exact copy of the tape that his grandfather had sent him, but obviously it was the same tape that his grandfather had sent. So now he's thinking about his grandfather too, in addition to thinking about his memories as a kid. So, our last couple of interviews with him, one of them kind of served as like an exit interview with, him just kind of talking about him getting ready to wrap up his career and thoughts about, what it would take to step away. And, but I thought about the first time I interviewed him for the show. And it's funny because I talked to him so many times, but never in this condition where he was stopping on his way in and it just felt like, we just had like 2 minutes. That was it. And we had to do so much negotiating just to get this 2 minutes of time before the game. And I felt a lot of pressure. Like, I had to get these questions out cleanly on camera. Otherwise, he was going to be gone. So I just remember feeling nervous and sweating all the times I talked to him. But Bruce, that first time I did, I hope it didn't show up on camera like that. But Bruce, I was nervous the first time we talked to him for that pregame Coast to Coast.
Well, you proved why you're a Hall of Famer, because he probably told you, I'll give you 2 minutes, but that interview went 4 minutes and 8 seconds, in case you're wondering.
The first one or the one with the tape?
No, the one with the Golden Greats of Basketball.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm sure I bought some extra time giving him that videotape.